The Earth is now in its worst shape in human history. That is according to a new United Nations report. It finds up to 1 million species of plants and animals face extinction, many within decades. Researchers cite climate change and human behavior as major contributors. Scientists say we can do small things in daily life to help combat the problem, like eating less meat and walking or biking more. But the big change will have to come at the policy level. So for more on this, I want to bring in Patricia Miloslavich in Paris. She contributed to the UN report. She also teaches at the Universidad Simon Bolivar in Venezuela, and she works for Global Ocean Observing System in Australia. That's quite a resume, Patricia, but we're so glad you're able to join us and take us through this really important research that's been done. Because we've been hearing about the impacts of climate change on the Earth for a while now. And what makes this UN report different?
Hello, Vlad. Nice to see you. Well, I was just listening to your previous show, but in the meanwhile, it was a treat for me. But in the meanwhile, we have to think that this is the only world that we know that supports life, and we really have to take better care of our life support system. So this UN report, the Global Assessment for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, puts together for the first time an assessment of what is the state of the problem that is affecting biodiversity and its services. It also provides scenarios. It also goes into providing solutions and what governance can be set in place in actually to help solve this problem.
So explain to our viewers, what are humans doing specifically that threaten? I mean, this number is staggering. 1 million species worldwide are being threatened. Is this a new phenomenon, or has it been just building since the beginning of modern civilization?
Well, we have seen in the past, history has taught us that there have been massive extinctions. This, however, cannot be considered a massive extinction. This is just a loss of species due to, at an unprecedented rate, because of human intervention. The drivers of these species loss and ecosystem loss is basically, in the first place, our extreme use or changes in the use of the land and of the oceans. We have intervened coast, land for agriculture, for many purposes, coastal development and any kinds of things. So these changes are actually producing severe declines in our ecosystems. Our second driver is basically the exploitation that we do to the resources. It's the extraction, direct taking the resources from nature. In the third place, it's climate change, which is exacerbating all of the other drivers. And then after climate change, well, as I'm seeing now in the images, it's pollution. And as I'm seeing now again in your image, it's invasive species. And you show there a picture of a lionfish, which is a very voracious fish that consumes many others. So all of these elements, all of these drivers combined act synergistically to actually accelerate the rate at which species are being lost and the rate at which ecosystems are being degraded.
And, you know, as we point out, because I just find it to be a staggering number, we're talking about 1 million different species. But, you know, at the very top of that are the ones, I just sometimes feel that to get people interested in this subject, you sometimes have to point to some of the larger animals that everybody is familiar with, because that is what can spur people to make changes in their life. When you think about a world where our grandchildren may never see a tiger, or may never know that a polar bear existed, or a cheetah, or a rhinoceros, and what that loss of life would mean in those areas where those animals live. The loss of, for example, of the species of polar bear in the Antarctic could mean a significant loss of life in other species as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, because every species has a function in the ecosystem they live. So they are key to absolutely all of the other species that live there. You mentioned the polar bears in the Arctic. They are a top predator. If you eliminate the top predators, all the trophic change will suffer a terrible unbalance. And then we won't see that nature will provide the services it can provide. And many of these services are not just for our own use to apply, but many of the other services are absolutely necessary just for our own survival. It's not just food, it's the oxygen we breathe. If you alter the food chain from the top predators to the fish that are below it to the zooplankton, which are these tiny creatures from which the fish feed, and then all the little cells that are primary producers from which these feed, we will get an imbalance, and even the level of oxygen in our atmosphere will actually change because of those. It's a cascade effect that goes both ways, both from the bottom up to the top down, depending on which level of the trophic change you are making those changes.
And so some skeptics will push back and they'll say, Patricia, look, animals have been going extinct since the beginning of time, and they have gone extinct, and the world being as resilient as it is, the planet being as resilient as it is, has compensated in whatever way, sometimes catastrophically, and other times you barely notice that those animals or those species ever existed. What do you say to those skeptics who say, look, the fact that the number of polar bears has declined precipitously over the course of 100 years, and yet they still remain the top predator in that part of the world, means that if, the last few remaining polar bears go, the Mother Nature will compensate in some other fashion? How do you address that?
Well, I would say that, yes, it's true that there have been extinctions in the past, that nature has taken its course. It's just that these have been processes that have taken millions of years, and nature has had the time to adapt and provide a response. We are not giving nature the time to provide a response. So the adaptations processes are quite slow. We are actually seeing evolution in our lifetime. People tend to think of evolution as a very long and slow process, which is true for many species, but we are also seeing evolution at very short rates because we're putting pressures on some of the species. We put pressures on plants using agriculture chemicals, and these causes resistance in some pests, in some weeds. We are also causing resistance in microbes to antibiotics. So we are putting a lot of pressure in the system that is altering evolution. But the short answer to your question is basically we are not giving nature enough time to provide a response. So we will be out of the species in too short time for nature to give us something back.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And, I often think I am a huge shark nerd, have been since I was a little kid. And when I first realized that sharks had evolved to, in many instances, the current state that they are 50 million years ago, which, is way before man first appeared on the planet. And now in just 150 years or so, we are talking about the extinction of certain species of sharks. That is sort of remarkable in such a short period of time versus the amount of time that those animals and creatures have existed on this planet. So I urge everyone who's watching this to check out this report that was released by the UN and to sort of educate themselves about how important it is to maintain the biodiversity in our planet for just not us, but our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. Patricia, thank you so much for sharing your information with us. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much. And the final message of the report is that there is hope, and the hope will come if we implement what we call transformative change. And transformative change is basically going through 3 I's, going through integration across stakeholders so that we work together for a common benefit. The second one is innovation, that we come up with technologies that will actually help to be sustainable. And the third one is just information. We need information, and information comes through monitoring in a sustainable way. So that's basically what we need to do. It's not that hard. And I really thank you for the opportunity of sharing this information with you.
Patricia Miloslavich, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.